Yosef Shlomo Harav Yosef Shlomo ben Risha. He should have a refuah shlema kreva. We're learning Le'ilu Nishmas Reb Shalom ben Eliyahu Halevi, who is the father of Fega Rachel Galam. Last week was his third yahrzeit. Unfortunately, I did not see the message from her before class, so I want to redress that this week. And of course, we're asking Hashem to watch over all of our soldiers. Much better yet, to put a miraculous end to this conflict, to this terrible war. A refuah shlema for all of those wounded, and a immediate redemption and salvation for all of the hostages. Very excited to wish Mazel Tov to Sarah Sitin, a classmate who gave birth to a baby girl. Her name is Chana, 2 weeks ago. Mazel Tov to Ruth Bell, who had a new baby grandson in Eretz Yisrael. I am assuming that we don't have a name yet. And big Mazel Tov to Menucha Rachel Moretsky, daughter of our classmate Sarah Moretsky, who became a bas mitzvah today. Mazel Tov, there should only be continued nachas and simchas for everyone. This is also a good time to announce that there are 12 whole spaces still available for the Shabbaton, after which there will unfortunately be no more spaces. So anybody who is still thinking about maybe coming, you might want to make your move. I think the project would like to further publicize it on another forum that's more public, and we're asking them to kind of keep it in-house in the family for just a few more days, to see if there's anybody who wants to yet sign up. Chayei-Sara Gimel, Chelek Chaf, Seif Aleph. Ala pasuk vayihi hu terem kila ledaber v'hinei Rivka yotzes. On the pasuk that says that it was before Eliezer even concluded davening that Rivka went out, towards him. Huva b'medrash. The medrash tells us, Maimer Rashbi. This is a teaching of Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. Shloishahem nenu b'mayne pihem. There are three people, three persons, notably, were answered on their prayers. Eliezer Abdei Shel Avram, Eliezer the servant of Avram, Moshe Rabbeinu, Shlomo HaMelech. Eliezer Vahi Terem Kilo L'Daber V'Hinei Rivka Yotzes. So the Midrash brings down the psukim, and the pasuk about Eliezer is the pasuk that this sicha begins with. Moshe, and where do we see that Moshe was answered? Dichsiv, as it says, and it was after he spoke all these things, and this was during the conflict with Kairach and his posse. And after Moshe finished to speak, the earth opened up and swallowed them. And Shlomo Dichsiv, and regarding Shlomo HaMelech, the pasuk says, when Moshe finished davening El Hashem, va'esh yorda min hashamayim, and the fire came down from heaven, and this ratified that the Shekhinah was in the Beis Hamikdash, etc. Now, the Rebbe says on this medrash, mipashtus lashon hamedrash mashma l'chayra. Simply speaking, from the way the medrash transmits this information, it's seemingly understood. The Inyan zeh shenenu b'mayne pihem hu b'schus ma'alasam ha'ishish shel shloisha elu shenimnu kan. It seems that the reason why they got a response on the prayer or the speaking of their lips, their mouth, is in the merit of who they were personally. These three people were very special. They were singular, and therefore they had the merit of being answered right away. And because all these three personalities received the same reward or the same schos, which is nenu b'mayne pihem, they were answered on what they asked for. And and especially as the Medrash underscores it, Shloishahem Nenu B'Mayne Pihem, that there are three. This is the way it's introduced to us. Hainu Shenichlelu Kulam Yachad, which means that they are all in one cohort. They're in one category. Move on, so it's understood. Sheyesh Natzad Maila Hashava B'Chol Shloisha Elu. So there must be some connective tissue. There must be some shared characteristic, some shared benefit or special mila. Help me. I'm casting about for the word. Rachi usually help me. But anyway, huh?
Advantage?
Yes, thank you. They have some advantage that is equal for all these three. V'tzarich lahavin. We have to understand this. Ha'ech yitachein l'damayis es Eliezer Eved Avram l'Moshe Shlomo. How can you compare Eliezer, as great as he was, but how can you compare Eliezer to Moshe Rabbeinu and Shlomo Melech? Afilu b'negei la'ofen ma'ila zu atzmei ba. Even if you're just comparing them for this particular facet of their lives or this particular facet of their experiences, that they were all three answered. But how do you lump them all in one category? The Godla Hatmiya, Kekushias Hameforshim, and the wonder is even greater, as asked by a number of the commentaries. Be'inyan nena b'mayna piv shebetfilas Eliezer, when it comes to this idea that these three merited a reply, but you see that in the tefillah of Eliezer, haya yisrein b'mehiras hadavar al tfilas Moshe u'Shlomo. You see that there's an advantage, that there's an extra edge that Eliezer merited, juxtaposed on the tefillas of Moshe and Shlomo. Why? Because Eliezer Ne'emar, because it's only regarding Eliezer that it says, Vayihi hu terem kila ladaber, even before he concluded speaking, hainu meaning, shenana oid koidem shesiyem tfilasai. The other two were replied to very quickly after they prayed. And Eliezer merited a reply from Hashem even before he finished davening. In contradistinction, Moshe and Shlomo experienced this when they finished davening. Like it says, when he finished davening, that was about Moshe. When Shlomo Melech finished davening. V'nimtza. So what do we find? Sheyeshna ilui b'Eliezer al Moshe Shlomo. So we find that not only is Eliezer put in the same category as Moshe Rabbeinu and Shlomo Melech, but he actually supersedes them in this respect. So we have to understand this. V'oid tzarich lahavin. We also have to understand be'im hayad davar mitzad mailas hanashim atzmai. If they merited this because of their personal greatness, my time anenu b'mayna piyam rak heim v'lo yacherim. So why only they and not others? In other words, if Eliezer was this great, there weren't any other great tzaddikim, no other great personalities in the whole history that could merit something similar. So we're forced to say, the inyan zeh sheshloisha elu nenu b'mayna piyam. So we're forced to say that the reason why these three are put in the same category by the Medrash, that they merited a reply on what came out of their mouths, is not so much connected to who they are, but rather, in the main, it's about what they were praying for. The Darish beer, and we have to explain Mahi Hamaila Miuchedes de Shalosh Tfilas Elu, Shadafka Bahen Haya Inyan Nenu B'Mayna Pihem. What is so singular? What is so special about these tefillos that those who offered these tefillos merited an immediate response? Beis. V'yuvan, and we'll understand this, Behektem hasparas hamayla bezeh sha'adam nena al tefillah b'mayna piv. The Rebbe says before we go into the three tefillas, and we're going to see three categories, but before that, we're going to preface with understanding what is this exalted characteristic where a person gets a response to their prayer. What does that mean? How can that be understood? Kasav Rambam b'Sefer Hayad. The Rambam writes in his Sefer Yad Chazaka, Mishnah Torah, Asher achas mima'alosav shel Baal Teshuvah, that one of the great characteristics of Baal Teshuvah is shetzoyek v'nena miyad, that he screams out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he merits an immediate reply. Ubil shaynai, and this is the exact terminology of the Rambam. Kama me'ula mailas hatshuva. How great is this characteristic or this advantage of tshuva? Emesh hayazem muvdal me'Hashem Elokei Yisrael. Yesterday, this person was separated from God of Israel, from Hashem, the God of Israel. Tsoyik ve'eino nena. He cries out and he is not responded to. V'hayayim, and today, hu mudbak b'shchina, he cleaves onto the presence of God. Tsoyik ve'nena miyad. He cries out and he merits an immediate response. B'tzarech lahavin. We have to understand. B'halacha shelifnei zeh, in the halacha right before this one, Kasav Harambam, the Rambam writes, Hatshuva mikarebes hasarachekim. Tshuva brings close those who are at a distance. Emesh hayazeh, trigger alert. Okay. Emesh hayazeh sanui lifnei hamakayim. Yesterday, this person was hated, mishukatz, disgusting, umeruchak, and at a distance, vita eva, and an abomination, v'hayayim, and today, hu ahuv v'nechmad, he is beloved, he is pleasant, karev, he is close, v'yedid, and he is a friend, or he is cherished. Ulechaira, seemingly, in yizeh shetzoyik v'nena miyad, harei hu mesuva miyisa ahuv v'nechmad v'karev v'yedid l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seemingly, the fact that this person cries out and he is replied to immediately, this would seem to be a result of the fact that he is beloved and pleasant and close and cherished l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'im kain, and if so, mipnei ma chilkei harambam le'inyan b'fnei atzmai b'halacha b'fnei atzmai. So why does the Rambam separate it into two halachas? In other words, doesn't there seem to be a redundancy here? Isn't he making a single point? And that is that by this person changing course and coming closer and cleaving on to Hashem, he merits a completely different standing in the relationship, and Hashem answers him very quickly. What's the news flash in each one of these halachas? V'yuvan al pi habir b'shtei halachas now. I will understand the distinction by explaining the two halachas. D'lechayra kasha, because seemingly it's difficult. Teichen shtei halachas echad hu. Seemingly the content of the two halachas is one and the same. Asher alidei tshuva nasa adam karv l'kadosh baruch hu. Simply distilled, through tshuva, a person becomes close to Hashem. We got it. But the Rebbe says no, no. Ach be'emes, but in truth, kavanas divrei harambam kan hi l'shtei dargais b'mailas hatshuva. The Rambam's intention here is to point out two different levels in the larger advantage of teshuva. And that is why the Rambam separated them into two halachas. B'halacha harishayna, in the first halacha, Ayri Rambam be'inyan kirav l'shchina. The Rambam refers to this idea that this person comes closer to Hashem's presence, comes closer to the Shekhinah. And as is his terminology at the beginning of the halacha, Gedayla tshuva shemikareves es ha'adam l'shchina. How great is tshuva? That it brings closer the person to the Shekhinah. And this expresses itself in the fact that yesterday this person was hated, and he was at a distance. And today he is beloved, and he is pleasant, and he is close, and he is cherished. That's in the first halacha. Ubahalacha hashniya, and in the second halacha, Iri, it refers to bidarga nalis yoiser b'malas hatshuva, to a higher level in the high level of tshuva. In tshuva itself, the second halacha refers to a higher level, where the Rambam says, "Kama me'ula milas hatshuva," how exalted is the advantage of teshuva. Asher loy zubavacha adam nasa ahu v'nechmat karav yedid. Not only does this person become beloved and pleasant and close and cherished and a friend, karav the Shechina, he becomes close to the Shechina. Ella, but there's a different term that the Rambam uses in the second halacha. In the first halacha, it's about becoming close. In the second halacha, he says, Nase mudbak b'shchina. He cleaves onto the Shechina. Me'uchad ima, becomes one with the Shechina. Devekos b'shchina, completely as one, because the edaman of devekos and davok is devek, like glue. Becomes like white on rice. They cannot be separated. V'lachein, kolol harambam inyan tzoyik v'nena miyad b'halacha zu. And that's why the Rambam includes this idea of that he calls out and he is replied to immediately in this halacha. Behem shech le'inyan, as a continuation, v'hayayim hu mudbak b'shchina, that today he clings onto, he becomes attached to the Shechina. And the Rambam doesn't include it, v'loy b'halacha kademes, in the previous halacha, where he says mikurav l'Shechina, close to the Shechina, kizeh shetzoyek v'nena miyad, because this idea that this person can cry out and merit a immediate response, hu taitza mihiyaisai mudbak b'Shechina. This is a result, this is an outgrowth of his being one with the Shechina, cleaving onto the Shechina, attached to the Shechina. Gimel. V'ha'hasbara b'zeh. What's the explanation? What is the difference between close by and cleaving, becoming one? I'll tell you the difference. It's the difference between calling someone and they don't pick up and calling someone and they do pick up. You could be close to the person, but they can't speak right now. But the next moment they get a phone call from their spouse or their child and they pick up. And that's the difference. The interval of time that elapses between when something reaches from the giver, from the sender to the recipient, the fact that there is an interval, that there is a time lapse, proves that the makabel, the recipient, is not one and the same, is not cleaving on, and is not united with the sender. It doesn't mean that the sender doesn't like them. It doesn't mean that they don't have a relationship, but they're not davuk u'me'uchad. They're not one. Upshite, and it's simple. Shekol echad mehem hu metzias nefredes. and each one of them is a different being. It's a different existence. A contradistinction, when they cleave onto each other, when they are one, there is no time lapse. There is no separation even in space. Because they are one, and there is no separation, there's no dissonance. And therefore, when a person is only close to Kadosh Baruch Hu, despite the fact that he is Ohuv v'nechmat karav v'yedid, he is beloved, and he is pleasant, and he is close, and he is cherished. Aval ein hu davuk b'shchina, but he is not cleaving onto the Shechina. He hasn't become one with the Shechina. Azai ein hachinami shebiyoser chaviv chulei yikabel Kadosh Baruch Hu's bakashas asay. It's true. In fact, because he is beloved to Hashem, Hashem will accept his bakasha, his request. Aval ein hechrach sheyanena miyad. But there's no imperative, there's nothing that forces the immediate response. Davka kasher hu mudbak b'shchina. It's specifically when one is cleaving onto the Shechina. Hainu shamispalul davuk u'meuchad ima'ein elai. When the person who is praying is attached to and one with the one who answers, then it's an immediate response. It's an immediate response because they're one and the same. Because they're davik umuchad. Yeah, Chani. You have to unmute yourself. Because even though we're very close and very cherished to each other, and even geographically very close,
you still can't read my lips.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think maybe I'm missing something. The Sikha starts off with the Eibishter answered Moshe Rabbeinu, answered Shlomo. But that's a given. Moshe Rabbeinu and Shlomo. Eliezer is, as we will call him, a Baal Tshuva, right? So, to some extent. So, like, what is the Sikha saying over here? That Hashem didn't answer Moshe and Shlomo as quickly as he answered Eliezer?
Well,
and he answered Eliezer even before he finished saying whatever he had to say. Why is the Sikha pinpointing Shlomo, Moshe Rabbeinu and Shlomo, and exalting Eliezer like this?
Dafka, because he was a Baal Tshuva.
So the Rebbe said
I
earlier.
think we're jumping.
So the Rebbe said earlier, he already concluded that it can't be about who they were, but rather about what they were praying for.
Where did the Rebbe say that?
Here, let's see. At the end, I think of Seif Beis, but let's just go there. Oh, at the end of Seif Aleph, the Rebbe says, if you look at page 1, the very last paragraph.
Yeah.
Because the Rebbe asks your question, and the Rebbe says, so you're forced to say, the fact that these three merited an immediate reply is not connected so much to their great attributes as for who they were, but in the main, it has to do with the content of what they were praying for. And the Rebbe is going to unfurl the 3 categories of relationships with the Kadosh Baruch Hu that they were praying for. But before doing that, the Rebbe first wants to explain by referencing the Rambam, what is the difference between being Karev l'Shechina and Davuk b'Shechina. Close.
The Rebbe's being very specific in the wording of the Rashbi, because the Rashbi said b'mayna piyim. So now we have to understand what does that mean. So the Rebbe is going to explain that. He's being very specific in what the Rashbi said.
Honey, yeah, good.
Okay, we'll wait and see. Thank you.
No, but to your question,
Understand, yes,
it's not
yes.
about the personalities, it's
Okay.
about what they were
What they're
praying
davening
for.
for.
Yeah,
They were davening.
okay.
The Mayna shall pihem. We're being specific about their pihem, not who they are, but what their words were, what their request was, what the pihem.
Yeah, thank you, Eliezer. Elisheva. All right. So the Rebbe is explaining that when you're one, when you're davuk, there's no time lapse. Dalit. Now the Rebbe says, "Ukashem shehu b'negei legavra ha'adam hamispalel." So just like we could understand this vis-a-vis the person that prays, because in halacha there's always gavra and chefza. There's the person who, let's say, does this person have a chiyuv? And then there's chefza, there's what you do the mitzvah with. So sometimes there's a chiyuv gavra. Every person has a chiyuv in a certain mitzvah. And sometimes it's only a chiyuv on the chefza. Like, for instance, take tzitzis. It's really a chiyuv on the chefza, because if you don't wear a four-cornered garment, then you don't have to wear, then you don't have to have tzitzis. Of course, God-fearing Jews have created a four-cornered garment so they could do this mitzvah every day. But the chiyuv is on the chefza, not on the gavra. So the Rebbe says that you could relate this, as we did in Seif Gimel, to the gavra, to the person who's praying. She'inyin tzoyik v'nena miyat talui v'hu taitzah miyoysa adam mudbak b'shchina. You could say that it's about how close the person is to Hashem, to the Shechina. Are they karaiv? Are they close? Or are they davuk? Are they cleaving on? And are they one entity? Al derech zeh yesh loymar b'negei lechefza. The Rebbe says, in the same way, you can relate this to the chefza. In this particular instance, the chefza is ma'alas v'toichen hatfila. It's the content and the advantage of the tefillah. Ubenidun didan. And in our case, what we're studying, ma'alas shloish tefillos elu. We want to look at what is so distinctive and special about these three prayers. Shehin kishuras le'inyan hadvekos b'shchina. All three are related to cleaving onto the Shechina, not just getting close to the Shechina, but cleaving onto the Shechina. And remind me that we should circle back to footnote 22, which is beautiful, but we will appreciate more after a little bit more. Bal pizeh yesh levaer. And based on this, we can explain Masha nivdelu shalosh tefillas elu dafka. How and why these three tefillas, these three prayers, requests, and treaties distinguish themselves. Aleph, tefillah shleima shahisa b'kesher legilui hashchina. The tefillah of Shlomo is about him asking for the revelation of the Shechina. V'shachanti b'soicham b'mikdash. He begs Hashem to rest among us in the mikdash. That's one type of cleaving. Beis, tefillas Moshe b'kesher lemachlokas kairach. Then there's the tefillah of Moshe in the context of the insurrection that Kairach and his people staged against Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe prayed, and he said, "B'zois teidun ki Hashem shalachani." With this, they will know that Hashem sent me. V'imbria yivra Hashem koyim. If Hashem is going to create a new existence, something novel, something new. So this is the cleaving of Hashem onto personhood, his shaliach. And Gimel, Tfilas Eliezer Bekesher L'Nisuye Yitzchak v'Rivka. This is a little surprise here. And what is the cleaving onto the Shechina that is expressed through the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka? Ki toichnan hu. So the Rebbe is soon going to explain how this unfurls, but he says right now, the content of these three prayers, who shleishes haifanim hakloliyim begili elikus ba'ifin shalas achdus. These three are three paradigms, general paradigms, in the revelation of godliness in a way where there's a fusion, where there's a unity, where there's a oneness, where there's a cleaving, where there's a dveikus b'shchina. And these are the three ways that express themselves bibria in the created world. And they express themselves ba'olam. So ba'olam, in space, in the world, this is Shlomo HaMelech's tefillah, that Hashem should come down to the Beis HaMikdash. Bivnei Adam, how Hashem attaches himself or reveals himself through personage or personhood. This is Moshe Rabbeinu's tefillah. And b'Torah, this is the tefillah of Eliezer. How so? So the Rebbe is going to explain all three. Hey, Inyan Gilui Elikus ba'olam ba'ifin shalas achdus, the idea of the revelation of godliness in the world, in a revelation that is on the level of his achdus, of oneness, of cleaving, who Gilui hashchina shahaya b'mikdash. This is the revelation of the Shechina that was in the Beis Hamikdash. Gilui Elikus b'mikdash haya b'makim. The revelation was in such a way that the place and God were one and the same. And it was plain and revealed for people to see the way in which this physical place abnegated itself to godliness that transcends the parameters of space. Space was elevated to a place above space. K'maimer Chazal, like the very, very well-known Gemara, Makam ha'aron eina min hamida. The Aron took up space. The Torah tells us how large the Aron was, and yet it also tells us how much space there was between the Aron and the walls of the Kodesh HaKodashim, and it doesn't add up. And the Gemara answers, Makam Aron eina min hamida. This is infinity within finitude. So that's the way in which the tefillah of Shlomo HaMelech was about Dveikus b'Shechina, cleaving onto the Shechina in space, ba'olam. Okay. V'zeh haya teichen tefillah Shlomo. Bana banisi bayis v'lecha. Shlomo Melech says, I built a beautiful home for you. Machain l'shiftecha elamim, a place where you can reside forever. Hashemayim u'shmei hashemayim lo yichalkelucha. The heavens cannot, literally means to sustain you, like kalkala, but it means really cannot contain you. Av ki abayis hazeh asher banisi, can this house contain you? V'tekev la'achrei zeh, and immediately after he said these words, nena b'mayna piv, he was answered. Ukchaloi shloimo lispalel, as soon as he finished davening, va'esh yordem hashemayim, the fire came down from heaven, the kvoid Hashem moleyes habayis, and the glory of God filled the house. Ubezois nifala hashras hashchina begolui beveis hamikdash, and through this was effectuated the residing of Hashem's presence in a revealed way, the Beis Hamikdash. Ume'az ve'elech nishara hashras hashchina ba'ifin nitzchi b'makom zeh, and from that moment onward, there remained always Hashem's Shechina there in an eternal way. Kepsak din harambam, like the Rambam adjudicates that kedusha eina zaza min hamakom, kedusha doesn't leave its place from that moment on. So that's the inyan of cleaving to the Shechina in space, in that dimension. Gilui Hashchina lifnei Adam. What about the revelation of the Shechina in personhood, ba'ofen shalas achdus, in this very spectacularly high fusion or union where they become one, who inyan hanavua, That is the Indian of prophecy. Gila soidei elavodav hanavim. He, the Navi says he revealed his secrets to his servants, the prophets. Asher hugam Indian ikri bemanasoi. And this is also a very important aspect of our faith. Ubaloshan Harambam, like the Rambam says, miyasoide hadas, it is from the basics, from the ABC of Jewish religion, theology, leda shahakel minaveis b'nei ha'adam, to know that God gives prophecy to people. Gilui hanevua hu ba'ifin shanavi nasa davuk uchad im dvar Hashem. In general, prophecy, a revelation through prophecy, means that the prophet becomes one with Hashem, an extension, that Hashem speaks through his throat, as it were. Ad shedvar Hashem mislabish besichlam v'hasagasam, till the word of Hashem is enclosed and is embodied and is vested in their intelligence, in their intellectual grasp, b'mare hanavua v'gam b'machshavtam v'diburam, in what they merit to see, and also in their thought process and in their words. And this is what Moshe davened about. And because of this, he merited an immediate reply. With this, you will know that Hashem sent me. To do all these things that they were accusing him of doing because of nepotism, because of his own personal, preferences. And he said, no, Hashem sent me. And he says, so Moshe says to Hashem, if they're all going to die like of natural causes, lo Hashem shalachani, then it will be that there will be proof that Hashem didn't send me. The Bria Yivra Hashem, Hashem will create a new creation, something that never happened before, v'yadatim, and you will know that Hashem sent me. Kolomer, this is to say, this miracle that the earth opened up and swallowed Kairach Ba'adasai was not a sign and was not a miracle to validate, generally speaking, Moshe's Torah. That the commandments that Moshe is imparting to the Jews were set to him at Sinai. No, that wasn't the purpose. But it was to prove, it was a sign and it was a miracle that Moshe was the emissary, and an emissary is like the one who sent the emissary, literally, for all of these things, in quotes, that they were fighting. And what was that? L'seis la'aron kahuna gedola, to give Aaron the kahuna gedola, ubanav skane kahuna, and to make his children deputy kohanim, ve'elitzafan nasi hakahasi, and to make Elitzaphan the leader of the family of Kahaz. All of these things that they were saying Moshe was doing of his own volition because of his skewed bias, this would be proof that no, this is what Hashem told him to do. V'yesh leimar, and we might say, Shahisa b'zeh mailan esefes al yis hadvarim Torahs Moshe, shahayu gam shlichus unevuas Moshe. That this is separate and apart from the fact that Torah tziva Moshe Ma'irasha Kilas Yaakov. That's separate. That's separate. This is a shlichus. This is a nevuah. Gila soidei va'alkein bria yivra gilui chadash nevuah. It was a new creation. It was a new gilui. It was a new revelation. It was nevuah. Shebesugo ubidugmasa haisa nevuas shar hanavim. This is a new category. This is nevuah. This is the cleaving in personhood onto the Shekhinah. Va'oifen haklali hashlishi, and what's the third category? Bigilui hashchina, in the revelation of Shekhinah in this world, b'Torah. How Hashem reveals himself through Torah. Araisa v'kuchabrichu kulachad. The Torah and Hashem are one thing. And this is Shayech l'tfilas Eliezer. And this relates to the tefillah of Eliezer. And the big question is, how so? Seif Vav. Eidos HaParsha d'Eliezer Amar Razal. We have a famous Gemara, Rashi brings it down, that Yafes Yichason shel Avdei Avos, Mitoirason shel Banim. In some places, the Torah is so cryptic, so few words. And here we have 67 psukim about the same story, doubled, right? Repetition. And so Chazal teach us that there's something about the conversations of the servants of the Avos that has an advantage even over the Torah of the children of the Avos. And the Rebbe says that from the fact that these two things are being compared, the conversations of the servants of the Avos with the Torah of the children of the Avos, it means that there is a correlation, that there's a shaychus, that there's a connection between them. Omevor b'chasidus, and this is explained in Chasidus, she'inyan sichason shel avdei avos, that the whole concept of the conversation, that is specifically the conversation being spoken of here in such detail, which is the shidduch of Yitzchak and Rivka, hu klolos inyan hatayra mitzvaseha. The inyan of the shidduch between Yitzchak and Rivka is generally speaking the inyan of Torah mitzvahs. And it's for this very reason, misupa hadavar b'kasuv ba'arichos, that it's written at such great length and at such great detail in the Torah. Zeu inyan ikri ukloli shal yadai ba klolos inyan matan Torah terasan shalbanim. It is something pivotal. It is something axiomatic, because it is through the agency of this story that we have the whole inyan of Matan Torah, the Torah of the children. How? V'habir bazeh. And the explanation is as follows. Hachidush de Matan Torah hu k'medubar kama pa'amim. What was the novelty of Matan Torah? It wasn't the information, right? The Gemara tells us that the Avos Imais had all of this information. What was the novelty? Chibur elyonim v'tachtonim. The fusion, the synthesis of the elyonim, the above, v'tachtonim, and that which was below, heaven and earth, the sublime and the mundane. Ad matan Torah heisa gzeira del yonim liyardet l'tachtonim v'tachtonim liyalu l'yonim. And Medrash explains that until Matan Torah, there was a gezerah, there was an edict, there was a law that the Tachtonim couldn't go up to the Elyonim, and the Elyonim couldn't come down to Tachtonim. That the citizens of Syria couldn't go to Rome, and the citizens of Rome couldn't go to Syria. Hashemayim shemayim laHashem, va'aretz livnei Adam. Heavens belongs to Hashem, the earth belongs to man, and never the twain shall meet, at least not in a physical sense. Hainu. What does this mean? That this gezerah, that this edict was revoked. She'al yidei matan Torah nifal chibor bein ha'olam tachtoinim le'elokus shelamayla me'olam ad shemischabrim yachad. It was only through Matan Torah that there was the ability, there was the capability for there to be a connection between Tachtoinim, the world, and Elokus, and godliness that is higher than the world, but not just a connection, but a complete fusion. And we find this most easily expressed in the observance of mitzvahs. Shala'achrei matan Torah, after matan Torah, shalidei kiyum mitzvah bedavar gashmi, that through observing a mitzvah with something physical, poyel ha'adam shahadavar hagashmi yehei kli le'lukus, the person is able to accomplish and affect that this physical thing becomes a conduit and a vessel for godliness. It becomes tashmishe mitzvah, something that is used for mitzvah. Tashmishe
I have a question. I have
Sure.
a question, Rivky.
Yeah.
But
Speaking,
we
don't
find
speak.
that by the bris milah. What? We find that by
Oh,
bris milah by Avraham
Hindi.
Avinu.
Yeah. Hindi?
What? Yeah.
Hi, good morning. No, not everybody knows you, Hindi Bornstein. I recognize your voice from Yemei Kedem, but not
You
everybody
mean
does.
you don't see my face?
We do not see your face and we don't even see a name. We see iPhone.
Oh. Oh, okay. I see. Okay. So we find this by Avraham with the bris milah.
True, and
So why?
that's why Avram said, "Put your hand right on my yerech, put my hand on
Right.
the bris when you
Right.
to take a shvua."
Correct.
But the Indian is that maybe you could say,
Like,
especially
why do we need Eliezer? Why do we need Eliezer to show his chabras of Elyonim and Tachtainim? We see it by Avraham Avinu.
it's not really about Eliezer. It's about him being the agent to create the his chabros, the fusion between Rivka and Yitzchak, and the Rebbe is soon going to explain.
Because of marriage.
Yeah, which becomes the not only the precursor, but makes possible the hischabros, the unity that will happen through Matan Torah. So it's not so much about Eliezer, which the Rebbe already said at the end of Sif Aleph, that it's not about the personalities, it's about what they're praying for. So Moshe prayed for his chabros, for this unity, for this cleaving in terms of personhood, and Shlomo Melech in terms of space, and Eliezer for the Torah, which is the third dimension in which the Eibishter is revealed in this world.
Sorry, I didn't understand how that answered the question. That sounded like a valid question to me, why Avram's bris wasn't first.
It's a very valid question. You're right. I got sidetracked with the second question, which is why Eliezer? So you're right. There's a bris. So I don't know the unequivocal answer to that, but here are some possible thoughts. One is that the mitzvah of bris wasn't yet given. It's true, Avram Avinu, but the Rambam says we don't do the bris because of Avram Avinu. We do it because it was a mitzvah later. So it could be that Avram, yes, he had the bris milah. In other words, there was a chabrus there, but it wasn't yet the inyan of the cleaving, the fusion of elyonim and tachtonim in a systematic way. Especially, you could say, because Avram Avinu was a merkava. So his guf was completely different than most bodies. Maybe you could also say that.
I mean, you could argue that for Yitzchak also. Most of us are not a oila tamima and all of that.
Right. And maybe another approach is to say.
We don't see anybody else using that as something special. Only Avram did it because he got a direct command from Hashem. So for him, it was ischabros, but it wasn't for everybody else. It wasn't
Hold
used.
on,
Everyone did a shua and they did that.
You could
Yitzchak didn't do that.
Milah, one
But he
second.
didn't
Abraham's
use
bris
it as
milah.
something.
Yeah, but Abraham's bris milah was in the category of after Matan Torah. That was the whole thing that the Rebbe was machadish. That mitzvah that he did was exactly like the mitzvah after Matan Torah, because it was the hischabus of the ruchnius and the gashmius and his gufar.
So then that's the exception that proves the rule, that everything else did not have the same ischabros, just the bris milah. Meaning in the world at the time was not yet ready for that elyonim and tachtonim fusion. Only with Avram, the exception of the bris, on Avraham was that able to happen. But cosmically, it couldn't happen yet.
I think that maybe the stress is on the Chabros with a davar gashmi, not with a person, but with a davar gashmi, which is a different category. Tzippa's pointing out that in the iconic Sicha of Atetze Dina Bas Leah, the Rebbe points out that the bris milah in Shechem showed that they did tshuva before they were killed by Shimon and Levi. Similarly, we have that Yosef HaTzadik made all the Egyptians that wanted bread, he made them get circumcised before he gave them bread. So, but maybe it's about his chabros al yanim tachtonim through a davar gashmi and not in personhood. I don't know. It's tzarech iyun, and anybody that can find the answer, we will all be very grateful. Please post it on our group.
I'm just confused why we brought Avraham in here. What tefillah did Avraham do? Aren't we talking about tefillah here?
No.
The answer to
Unless I
tefillah?
miss something, Rivky. What?
You're cutting out, Rachi. We can't hear you. I think your connection might be unstable. Esther, it was a side question. Of course, we're talking about tefillahs, and we're not talking about Avraham Avinu's tefillah here. But we're just about, the Rebbe is explaining to us how the tefillah of Eliezer was, what was the content of his tefillah. It's about Torah and mitzvahs, and that the Rebbe started to explain that by Matan Torah was the fusion of Elyonim v'Tachtainim. So Hindi's question was, wait a minute, we already had such a thing in the bris milah of Avraham Avinu. So we're discussing, is that the fusion, or is that in a separate category, an exception? And it seems very much that it is the exception. Okay, so how does this relate to what Eliezer is trying to accomplish? So let's go back to Vahabir Bazeh on top of page 96. Vahabir Bazeh. The novelty of Matan Torah is the connection of Elyonim and Tachtainim, the heavens and the earth. Ad Matan Torah Haisak Zer Elyonim Yodel Tachtainim, Tachtainim Yalel Elyonim, Oba Matan Torah Nizbatla Hagzer, Tachtainim Yalel Elyonim, Elyonim Yodel Tachtainim. Hainu Shalidei Matan Torah Nifal Chibor Bein Ha'olam Tachtainim Le'elokus Shalamayla Me'ha'olam Ad Shemischabrem Yachad. Reb explains that until Matan Torah, there was a decree that never the two can meet, and after Matan Torah, this was revoked. Shala'acharei Matan Torah, shal yidei kiyum mitzvah b'davar gashmi, because after Matan Torah, when you observed a mitzvah with something physical, poyeh la'adam sha'davar gashmi kli le'elukus, that the same hide from a cow becomes a sefer Torah, lahavdil, not a pocketbook or a leather skirt. It becomes tashmishe mitzvah, tashmishe kedusha, ad la'oifen shel yichud, until it becomes mamish a chayfetz de kedusha. It becomes something holy. V'hahachana, v'hahakdama lechibor zeh, and the preparation and the preface to what happened in Matan Torah, she'al yidei Matan Torah hayu koydem l'chein, and this is also the infusion of energy for what we have to do after Matan Torah. What is it? It is the story of the coming together of Yitzchak and Rivka. The first time that the Torah relates in Pshuta Shel Mikra. Okay, so the Rebbe says, yes, there are many places where this is alluded to. But the first place in the Torah where you see it, Mamish Pshuta Shel Mikra, a chibor, a fusion, a synthesis of Elyonim and Tachtainim, Shekedusha, Davar Hamufrash, that something holy, something set aside, Nischabra v'nisachta im Tachtainim b'yichud gamor v'amiti, becomes unified with something from the lower realm in an absolute and true unity, hu b'nisuye Yitzchak v'Rivka, is in the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka. How so? B'nais of Lazeh Yitzchak haya b'nai shel Avram, in addition to the fact that Yitzchak was a son of Ram. Haya nimo l'shmeina, he was circumcised at 8 days. V'chol hanyanim hanalim shekibel me'Avram. So in addition to everything that he inherited nature-wise, being the son of Avram Avinu, being circumcised at 8 days, be'ez hanisuyin, haya Yitzchak la'achri hanisyayin, o mesiras hanefesh ba'keda, v'nis'ala l'dargas oila tmima kedusha b'tachlis. But then there's also nurture. There's also what he accomplished. When he got married, he was after this great test and the great Mesiras Nefesh of the Akedah, and he was elevated to the level of a Oila Tamima, a complete offering to Hashem. Kiddusha B'tachlis, right? We know that Yitzchak Avinu is the only one of the Avos that never left Eretz Yisrael. Yitzchak Avinu is the only one of the Avos that only married one woman. Yitzchak Avinu spent 3 years in Gan Eden before he got married. There's all these things about Yitzchak. He is a Oila Tamima. He's in a class by himself. Ule Idach, on the other hand, Rivka Haisa Bas Besuel, Achos Lavan, Uba Mipadan Aram Chutz La'aretz. And Rivka represented a completely dichotomous energy. She is the daughter and the sister of unsavory personalities. She comes from Padan Aram, not exactly a hotbed of spirituality. She comes from Chutz La'aretz. She comes from the other side. Ba Bisha she'ein Chutz La'aretz kedai lecha leYitzchak. And so Rivka comes from Padan Aram, and at the same time, Yitzchak is told, Rashi brings down that Avram Avinu is warned. He shamer lecha pen tashiv es b'ni shama, warns Eliezer, don't bring my son there. So they come from two opposite sides of the rainbow. The mizeh move on. So from this is understood. Sheshlichusay shel Eliezer lahavi es Rivka mimkoima b'padan aram chutz la'aretz leisha avor Yitzchak oila tamima v'davak b'ishta v'hayu lebasa echad harei zu aliyah hachi gedola. So from this is understood that Eliezer's mission to bring Rivka from her place where she was in Padan Aram in chutz la'aretz, and to bring her as a wife for Yitzchak, who was a Oila Tamima. He was a complete burnt offering to Hashem, as it were. And what's the idea of marriage? Here we have the word again, V'davak b'ishtoi, to cling on to the wife and to become one flesh. This is the greatest aliyah that could possibly happen. Ma she'ein kein nisui Avram v'Sara, haya koidem shenas Avram tamim aydei mitzvos milah. If you want to compare and contrast, the marriage of Avram and Sarah was before Avram became more complete through the mitzvah of Milah. And it was before all the work that Avram and Sarah did together to bring people to monotheism, to bring them to call on to Kel Olam like we did last week. Bizman shagam Avram kisara haya b'or kazdim ubeveis aviv terach koidem she'asa tshuva bein oiv de'avodah zara. They were both of the same ilk, you could say. They were both in Or Kasdim. They were both in the house of Avram, and who, after all, was Avram's father, Terach, and later he did tshuva. But this was before he did tshuva, when he was the manufacturer of idols. And Yitzchak is a whole different thing, Yitzchak and Rivka. And because everything that the fathers did is a sign, and as Chassidus explains, creates a reality for the children, move on is understood shahasiman v'nesinas hakayach le'inyan hayichud v'achibor shenischadish b'matan Torah. So the siman that the Torah would bring together, and the strength for this to happen, this fusion, and the bringing together that was novel to Matan Torah, Mikhaire, its source is Binisuya Yitzchak and Rivka, is in the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka.
Just
Zayin.
by the way, it looks like footnote 61, the Rebbe is addressing the question of Avram, and he says that was the beginning, and then Yitzchak and Rivka's marriage was the continuation of that
Let's
in
do
like
it.
a global sense.
Let's do it. 61. Laha'ir. Shagam ha-mitzvah shahiset eitzel Avram b'dugmas ha-mitzvah shel achri matatay mitzvahs mila. Hindi, you haven't lost your touch. Nishara hakdusha gam achri ma'isa ha-mitzvah. The Rebbe says that want to make mention of the fact that the mitzvah of Mila that was by Avram was in the same vein, in the same modality as the mitzvahs of after Matan Torah, wherein the kedusha of a mitzvah remains in something physical. But the revelation of this happening, like Hani said, on a more global scale, happened through Eliezer. When Avram said to him, "Place your hand under my thigh," which was in relation to and was the precursor of what he was going to do, which was to bring Yitzchak and Rivka together in marriage. And the lesson for me is that I need to do every footnote, not just some. But thank you, Hindi, and thank you, Chani, very much for that. Zayin. Al pizeh yesh liyashev hatmiya hanal. And based on this, we can now circle back to our question that we were wondering about. Al zeh shebe'inyan nena miyad that tfilas Eliezer haya yisrain b'mihiras demiyad ala mayne l'tfilas Moshe Shloimeh. Not only were we pondering how Eliezer comes into the same category as Moshe and Shloimeh, and why are there not others that should have made the cut, but that Eliezer has an advantage over Moshe and Shloimeh, and that is that he was answered even before he finished davening, not just right after. Shedafka hu nena oid koidem shenistaymat filasai. Dafka he merited a reply even before he finished. Whereas for Moshe and Shlomo it was only after they finished. Why is this? This is because there is something that is an advantage that Torah has over Nevuah and the Beis Hamikdash. Gilui elokus hanimshach bin Navi val derech zu beveis Hamikdash inyanei shnei dvarim hamisachdim yachad. The revelation of elokus, of godliness, that is revealed through prophecy or is revealed through the Beis Hamikdash, that is two things joining. Two different things joining, omitam zeh matzinu, and for this reason we find shebe'inin gili hanevuah haya b'chol nevuah b'chol navi chiluk avadredas, and because it's be'etzem two different things, so there's gradations, there's variation in terms of the level of prophecy, and there's variation kaidem shenisnabe, before the prophet prophesies, b'shas hanevuah, during the prophecy, la'achri hanevuah, and after the prophecy. B'noisaf al zeh she'achar kach poska nevuah b'chlal. And then, of course, we have the idea that prophecy in the main stopped. B'al derech zeh b'negei lebeis hamikdash, and it's the same thing with the gilui hashchina beis hamikdash. B'vayisheni chasru hey. There were 5 things missing in Bayesheni, and the Gemara Yuma lists them, so I'm going to give them to you. The 5 things, the 5 phenomena that constituted the difference between the first Mikdash and the second, missing from the second Mikdash were the Aron Habris, the cover, the Kruvim, the fire of the Shechina, and the Urim V'Tumim. Or some say it's the spirit of prophecy. So those things were missing. So that means that it's not one and the same, that there's two things. And when there's two things, there could be gradations and there could be variables in the strength or the potency of the fusion. Like it says, Rak b'shloisha regolim yira v'yira'eh. There were different times in the Beis Hamikdash. It was during the Shalosh Regolim that you came to see and be seen. Or Ein Avoida B'Layla. During the day there was Avoida. At night that ceased. That there's variables, there's differences, there's gradations. Then there was the Chorban Beis Hamikdash. Va'af al pi shakdusha sheba eina betela. And although the holiness never goes away, mikol makom Beis Hamikdash hagashmi sheboy haya nira be'eni basar shemokom ma'aron eina min hamida. Nevertheless, the physical Beis Hamikdash, where you could see this Gili Hashchina so much so that you could see infinity with infinitude, you could see something that took up space but didn't take up space, charav, it was destroyed. And now we have a situation where you can't see with your physical eyes Gili Elokus. This means the kevon she'inyan Gili Elokus behem hu davar shenischadesh b'metziusam lachen yesh b'zeh makom lahefsek. Because the way in which godliness was revealed to a prophet or in the Beis Hamikdash was a novel overlay, therefore there is possibility for it to cease. When something is inherent to your system, so it's inherent to your system, that's it, it's one and the same, that is it. But when it's an overlay, there's going to be cessation. But that also displays that there isn't that fusion, that complete dveikus. Masha enkein, in contradistinction, haterehi milichatchila mitzius achas emelukus. The Torah is one and the same with godliness. Araisa v'kuchabrichu kulachat. The Torah and Hashem are one. There is no distinction. There is no fissure. There is no dissonance. There's no daylight. Ubetara ein makam l'shinuyim, and there's no possibility for changes. HaTorah amedes la'olam u'la'olmei alamim. The Torah stands eternally. Ein la lo'shinui v'le'gira'in v'le'tosefes. There's no changes. There is no taking away. There is no adding. There's no mitigation, and there is no addition. And because the unity of the Torah and God are one, לכן גם ההסאחדות לישראל והעולם עם אלוקות, כאשר היא באה על ידי התורה. The unity of Yisrael and the world that we live in with godliness, as it comes to be through Torah, is kulachad, is one. He ba'ofen zeh is in such a way al yidei Torah that Yisrael v'kuchabricha kulachad. Through the Torah, Yisrael and Hashem become one. And in like fashion, the very existence of the world is connected to Torah in a way that cannot be separated. And I'm just going to add here, because I think this is one of the most spectacular, if you could say, I mean, who am I to say, but okay, it's a spectacular thing that the Rebbe taught us, that it's not just that histakel ba'araisa ubara alma, that the Eibishter looked into the Torah and created the world. It's not just, as we always say, that the Torah is the blueprint for the world, because everybody that was ever engaged in a construction project knows that you can digress from the blueprint. It's possible. And it most often happens that you have an idea afterwards and you could catch it in time and you could make a change. But the way the Rebbe understood the fusion of Torah and the world, and this is not my metaphor, it's brilliant and it's from a JLI class, that it's like the back end of what you see on your screen. You can't separate them. So if you make a change at the back end, you're going to see it on the screen. In other words, it's not that the Torah is an overlay, and the Rebbe underscores this in so many sichos, that there can't be anything in this world that opposes Getlichkeit, that opposes godliness, because it's connected and comes out of the Torah, period, exclamation point. The Rebbe makes this point very famously in a letter to a shipping company. I'm forgetting the name. Maybe somebody here remembers the name of a shipping company. I think it was the flagship, no pun intended, shipping company of the state of Israel at the time. And the Rebbe wanted them not to,
Sim.
sorry?
Sim.
Yes, thank you. And there's a famous letter, and the Rebbe makes this point that you can't do anything in this world. This world, put it this way, nothing in this world can be in opposition to the Dvar Havaya, to the Ratzon Elyon, to Hashem's will.
That's my Rivky, hi. This is my second best sikha, which is about Kol Yatza V'lo Kol Rama V'lo Yatza.
Loi Pasak.
Kol Rama V'lo Yatza. Kol Gadav Lo Pasak.
Loi Pasak.
V'lo Yatza. When by Matan Torah that there was echo what's the greatness, there was no echo, you would think just the opposite, etc., etc. And I've actually used I've used it on shluchas. I taught people that said that they can't do this, pialacha, if they want to do XYZ, and I tell Sikha, and it actually has a very deep effect. They're on the level to receive it. Thank you.
Yeah,
I wanted to say that. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah. Thanks, Rachi. Yeah. Meiredik idea. Hainu, this means it's not only that the world was created for the Torah, which would mean that there's two things. There's world and there's Torah, and the world was created in order to keep the Torah. No, it's rather that the very existence of the world is predicated on the Torah, K'maimar Chazal, like the Chazal teach us, Shehitna Kadosh Baruch Hu Ma'aseh Bereshis, that Hashem made a condition with the world upon creation, V'amar, and said to the world, listen, Im Yisrael Mekabel Es Terasi Mutaf Chule. If Bnei Yisrael will be Mekabel, will accept the Torah, then good, you'll be able to exist. And if not, it's over. The gig is finished. Perush. She'etzem metzius hanevroim hi hatanai d'Yisrael mekabel es tarasi. The very existence of the world is contingent on Bnei Yisrael accepting the Torah. V'lachein, and therefore in Yenena shebetfilas Eliezer ben Agel and Yisur Yitzhak Rivka, and for this reason, now we're circling back to the distinction that the Rambam made, right? The difference between being karev and being davuk. For this reason, Eliezer, there was an advantage. His tefillah was answered before he even finished asking. And this hamayra al klolos in Torah, it was because of the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka, which is an allusion to the whole idea of Torah, which is the fusion of Elyanim v'tachtainim, the fusion of the Eila Tamima with the girl from Padan Aram. Haya ba'ofen shel terem kila l'daber. So Hashem answered him even before he finished speaking. Before we go further, I forgot. I wanted to just point out now footnote that I found fascinating earlier, but now I mentioned it, but now we're in a position to really appreciate it. Footnote 22. You know how in many Rashi sichas, the Rebbe teaches that if Rashi brings down the Baal HaMaimer, the one who taught what Rashi is teaching, then we understand the Inyan better by looking at the life of the Baal HaMaimer. So look at footnote 22. Baal Pizeh Yumtak. So now we'll understand Masha Baal HaMaimer, who is the one who the Medrash is quoting here. It's the Rashbi. And what do we know about the Rashbi? Torah Sayum Nasai. The Torah was his, it was not just his avocation, it was his vocation. This is what he did. Ki'ilu zed nena miyad. This advantage of being replied to immediately, eina mitzad inyan v'geder hatfila mitzad atzma, because, like the Rebbe is saying, it's not about the tefillah. It's because what was the tefillah about? It was about the Torah. And we find an interesting thing about the Rashbi. Sha'al yedei amiras Torah, through the Rashbi saying Torah, pa'al yeridas geshamim miyad ukiroi. He was able to effectuate in a time of drought that rain came down immediately and in exactly the way they need it, like Chayei Hamagal, not like Chayei Hamagal, Shapal Alidei Tfilasai. Chayei Hamagal was also able to bring down rain through his prayer, but Chayei-Sara Kama Bakashai. But it was after a few times that he prayed, and it needed adjustment, Sheyeh Karoyu, that it should be in the proper way. So it's just amazing the riches that can be mined here, and you like there's level after level after level, and that's just one exhibit A, one example. So we're up to Ches, yeah? Seif Ches.
It's interesting because the Rashbi in the beginning wasn't like what we're saying here. That Teresim Nasa is not what we're saying here.
No, the Rebbe doesn't mention, but I'm just saying.
He had to go back. I know, but I'm saying it's interesting if you go into the Rashbi who got to that level. He wasn't on that level even after being in the cave for so many years. Very interesting.
Who remembers that iconic song? Go back to the cave till you understand the world and the people I love.
That's it. I could sing it.
I could sing it too. Okay. Yeah, but what the Rebbe is fetching here in this ha'ara is that it was through Torah. It wasn't through tefillah, it was through Torah. And Torah is this Indian of Dveikus. And that's why it's ne not tchila. Even terem kila. Okay. Ala pasuk vayehi hu terem kila goyme mevor b'chasidus. On this pasuk, Chasidus explains sheba'hamshachas elokus yeshnam shnei ofanim. That in bringing down and drawing down elokus, there are two modalities. Hamrumazim b'pasuk hashaleach imrasei oretz va'ad mehera yaretz devarei. And these two modalities are hinted at in the pasuk of Tehillim, who sent his word to earth. And then the second part of the pasuk is, and speedily will run his words. So Chasidus explains, Hashaleach imrasei aret koyel hamshacha hiredes lamata ba'ifin shala'at la'at. The first part of the pasuk that says, and he sends his words to earth. This is in a way of slowly. Hainu shenim shechas derech seder shtalshlos hailemas. It comes through the seder shtalshlos. It comes through the chain of devolution. It comes down in a seder mesuda. Mi madrega limadrega, from one level to another. Ubechol madrega misachedes hamshacha im ha'olam shmadrega zu. And on every level, this hamshacha, this effluence, is kind of vested in that level. Ad sheyeredes lamata, until it comes down into this world. But then v'yeshna hamshacha. But there's another type of hamshacha. There's another type of effluence. Shehi ba'ofen shel va'ad mehera yaretz devarei. That it comes down mehera. It runs. Hainu shenim sheches tekef lamata b'mehiros. It comes down immediately and speedily. Umidaleges, and skips over me'al seder shtalshlos. It skips over the whole protocol. all the red tape, as it were. The sibas hachiluk ben shtei hamshachas, and the difference between these two types of drawing down of godly energy. Shahadavar tali b'mkayr shemimenu hinimshachas. The difference is sourced and depends on where it comes from. When it comes from a level in godliness that has a relationship with hishtalshlus, with the worlds, then it comes down through hishtalshlus. Then it comes down through hislapshus, which means that the light, the energy, the effluence has to enclose itself. It has to be vested in those different levels. But when the light comes from a place that transcends hishtalshlus, then the light comes down immediately. 1 second. Okay. Sorry about that. Then it comes down. Yeah, this is a hamshach about a broken dishwasher that needs my attention. Verstehst? So I'm going to skip over that level right now. So azai hi nimsheches tekef lamata. Then this energy, this light, that's rooted in a transcendent source above Ishalshlos, comes down, it comes down speedily. Because it's not hamshacha that has to come through the normal seder shalshlos, in a way that it gets vested in those different levels. That's one way of understanding the difference between tzaddik, a neshama from, like when somebody says mamish, a neshama from Atzilus. Everybody's neshama it goes through Atzilus. But the difference is that most of our neshamas experience hislapshus in Bria, in Yetzira. In other words, it's like a person that travels around the world and they pick up habits and maybe words and maybe an accent, or the person that travels around the world and they return exactly as they were. The neshama of a tzaddik comes down, but is not bihislapshus in any of the levels that would mitigate its original pristine holiness, whereas regular neshamas of the rest of the pedestrian folk, are impacted. There's the Indian of Islapshus. And this further explains the advantage of the tefillah of Eliezer juxtaposed against the tefillah of Moshe and Shlomo. Asher dafka etzloi haya hadavar terem kila ladaber. That dafka by him there was this, that even before he ceased to speak, because he was davening for Yitzchak. And Yitzchak is the Indian of Gevuris. Tigboiris hachayos, the strengthening, like the overwhelming of vivifying force. In other words, transcendence. And that's why the answer to the prayer was also in this transcendent way. It wasn't just speedily like it was for Moshe and Shlomo, but it was a let's just say a speedy answer on steroids, terem kila ladaber, even before he finished speaking. And the Rebbe says we might say that this aligns with another beer, with another thing that's explained in Chassidus. That mitzad seder shtalshlus his achdus olam melkus he kavyochol kamei davar achesh and his ached laachrei ze melkus. That mitzad seder shtalshlus, it's a fusion of the world with godliness, kavyochol, as it is two things. V'dafka mitzad or ein sof shelamala mishtalshlos. It's dafka from the vantage point of the unlimited light, the light without an end, that transcends hishtalshlos. Ubefrat mitzad atzmusa yizbarach, and especially from atzmos, hine milachatchila. On that level, from the beginning, ha'olam hu echad mamash im elokus. The world and elokus are one thing. And that's like kind of a echo of what we did last week, Kel Olam as opposed to Kel Ha-Olam, because the Yesh HaNivra, the Yesh HaAmiti, the existence of that which is created, and the true existence, which is only one thing, He Metzias Achas Kavyachol, they are one thing, one and the same. Ein Oid Milvadai in the most perfect way. Now, I just want to quickly share with you something special that the Rebbe said in the Sikha, when the Sikha was given, but is not recorded in Likutei Sichas. And I'm going to share it with you from something called Halikut. So the Vad Hatzmimim, the like special organization that does beautiful things for the Bachrim in different yeshivas, a few years ago, maybe 7 or 8, I'm not sure, started an initiative where Bachrim learn one volume of Likutei Sichas, and they mamish like learn it inside out, and they get tested, and there's prizes, and it's really very, very beautiful. And now they took it to the next level, and interestingly, this year they are doing Chelek Chaf, which we are doing now through Pratul Likutei Sichas, and they are publishing a, I think it's like a 6-page insertion. I think it's supposed to be an insertion to the Derher. And on this Sikha, I want to read to you what the Rebbe said as a Hayra'ah from this Sikha. I wasn't able to print it out because of my grave limitations when it comes to technology, but I could read it from my phone. Okay. The story of Eliezer, the servant of Avram, comes and teaches a lesson to every Yid. Avraham was kind to everyone and didn't consider whether or not the receiver was deserving of his kindness. Every Yid is an inheritor of the Avos, in this case Avram. An inheritor takes the place of the one he inherits in all aspects, and therefore every Yid will receive Midah Keneged Midah from Hashem in the place of Avram. Just as Eliezer, the servant of Avram, was answered before he finished davening, how much more so we, Avram's inheritors. It should have said probably descendants, but it's, Bachrim, will merit that Hashem answers us even before we finish davening. And listen to this. The Rebbe says, all that is necessary is a small contribution of our own efforts. One must only put in quotation marks, a small finger, and I'm going to read the footnote on that, as the expression goes, and start davening, but Hashem will answer him before he finishes. And therefore Yid can serve Hashem with joy, even in Golos, for even before he concludes his plea, Hashem will answer him. May we merit that even Terem Kila Ladaber, before we finish speaking, Mashiach should come now. Now you could see why it wasn't included, because it takes away a little bit from the focus here, right, of Yitzchak and Rivka, but it's like it's a sidebar. But on the footnote of what it means to put in a little finger, I don't have to come? Okay. Look at that. Look at that. I signaled that I wasn't going to come at that moment when I was needed for this repair person. And Hashem answered me that now I got a message, I'm not needed anymore. Look at that. Okay. So the Medrash relates that Rabbi Chanina ben Daisa once found a beautiful stone which he wanted to donate to the Beis Hamikdash. It was too heavy for him to carry. 5 men appeared and told him that they could help bring it to the Beis Hamikdash, but he must put one hand on the rock. He put one hand on the rock and instantly found himself in the Beis Hamikdash. The Chachamim told him that the men must have really been angels. And the Rebbe would quote this, Etzba Ketana, all we have to do is put our little finger. And and the Eibusher will take care of the rest. So that's pretty bolstering way to begin our week, and now we begin our Farbrengen.
Rivky?